Should Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen worry? Polls still predict a rematch next year of the 2017 presidential runoff, but a record abstention rate in Sunday's second round of French regional elections shows just how volatile outcomes can be when citizens vote with their feet. Indifference or disillusioned? How would a low turnout upset the form next year in 2022? On the night, the big winners proved to be the old traditional parties that Macron had reportedly slayed for good, while his LREM formation, founded from scratch, failed to convince. And as for the far right, not only were hopes of finishing tops anywhere dashed, it actually lost ground. Has Marine Le Pen lost one election too many? Or do the French know that in a nation where the president enjoys outsized powers, the election that counts is the one that's happening in less than 11 months' time? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking how, with one election ending, another campaign is beginning. And joining us, Jacques Maire, member of the French Parliament from the LREM party of Emmanuel Macron. Thank you for being with us. Also with us today, Socialist Party City Councillor Olivia Polsky, Deputy Mayor in charge of Commerce and Trade.
Yes.
Welcome to the show. Welcome as well to Frédéric Gilly, a professor of urban studies at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po, the co-founder of the online journal Metropolitics.
Hello.
And Gérald Olivier, welcome back, editor of the France Amérique blog, columnist at Atlantico.fr. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Nearly 66%. That is the abstention rate on Sunday. 5 regions going to the socialists. Remember them and their allies. 7, including those are the parts in pink. The parts in blue are including the largest region, the Greater Paris area, to be led by the conservative Les Républicains party, which finished, you'll recall, in single digits just 2 years ago in European elections. Yenna Lee has more.
On a national level, these two politicians and their parties seem to dominate the conversation. Centrist President Emmanuel Macron and his far-right rival Marine Le Pen. But on a local level, it's a different story. The Republic on the Move and the National Rally parties failed to win a single region in mainland France this year. Le Pen blamed the poor results on other parties doing all they can to block a far-right win.
Ce soir, nous ne prendrons pas de région, puisque des sortants, à l'aide d'alliances contre nature, ont tout fait pour nous empêcher de montrer aux Français notre capacité à diriger un exécutif régional.
Meanwhile, the Republic on the Move's national representative fended off suggestions that his 5-year-old party has a head but no body.
On est déçu de ces scores-là.
On voit bien votre difficulté à vous enraciner dans le pays.
Ben c'est un
en fait, la République en marche n'existe pas. C'est un homme, Emmanuel Macron. Et pardonnez-moi, mais c'est dur pour vous. Je pense que vous passez vos journées à essayer de faire prendre des racines à ce mouvement qui a fait rêver des Français.
Je mène un travail qui est collectif.
Despite the results, polling indicates that the president and his far-right rival are likely to face each other once again in the second round of the 2022 presidential vote.
We need to stress, of course, that all of these have been local elections with local stakes, and Le Pen will go on having a big message when it comes to national issues such as crime and immigration. But she has a dilemma to address in the huge numbers of former voters who didn't turn out for her party here.
Le Pen isn't alone. At less than 28%, low turnout has hit all parties across the board, representing historically low interest in what French politicians have to offer.
Frédéric Gilly, how do you interpret the low turnout?
Well, basically I'm an economist. And as an economist, when you see a problem of equilibrium, it can be either a supply problem or a demand problem. And we consider the abstention and the level of abstention as a problem of demand. Citizens would be out of the game. Whereas I think it's basically a problem of supply. If you talk with people about what they care, they will come back to the vote. for years and years, politicians, parties, only deal about inside business. And 3 years ago.
So what you're saying, looking at the campaign we just witnessed, was there was a lot of talk about crime, about that these issues didn't resonate with the voters?
If you listen to people, to the politicians on the 2 Sunday evening debates, they were saying, well, we've not been pedagogical enough with people. We have not explained what they were voting for. But they were not talking about the subjects. The subject of the regional election was health, was education, was internship.
Yeah, because regional parliaments have hold the purse strings for these things.
All mobility, all the questions that fascinate people. I mean, in my everyday life, I interview thousands and thousands of people. They always talk about that in a politician way. They care about their future. They care about the future of their children. And they never find back what they say in the political parties' voices. So in the end, they don't come to vote. That's basically a problem of supply because they have no one on the stage debating, talking about what they care.
All right, for France's highest abstention rate, we can head to the northeast. And Forbach, population 21,000, where more than 4 out of 5 citizens stayed home on Sunday.
No matter who we vote for, we're still going to suffer afterwards. So no, I wasn't interested in this election.
I wasn't aware that we were supposed to vote 2 Sundays in a row. I thought it was only once, and that's all.
I'm not at all interested in regional elections. I only vote for the mayor and in presidential elections.
I only vote for mayor and presidential elections. Jacques Maire, is this the real reason that the French know that this isn't the election that counts?
I think Mr. Judy is quite right when saying that there might be a problem between supply and demand. But this is not something which happened in the last days. When you look at the rate of participation in the last 20 years, particularly in local elections, this level of participation has dropped, I would say, regularly. And it's true that despite the appeal made by the entire political clans, following the first tour, the shock of conscience didn't happen. And I think this should interrogate, I would say, every political party, every candidate, how to reconnect with people. And it's very true that what was at the center of the debate during the last 2 months was not at the center of the competences of the region and the departments. And that's probably something which is a pity. We discussed about security, which is a big concern for French people, but not in the competences of these assemblies. We didn't discuss about the assemblies, the elderlies. And when you see also the rate of participation of people, probably the rate was quite low, but average for the elderly, but it was insignificant for the youth. And it means that the future, if we do not change anything, it's going to be very tough for politicians.
Olivia Polsky, why don't young people vote?
Well, they don't vote that much. In Paris, we have seen many young people, but I think that's not everywhere. And, well, I think it's a long process for years, and they don't recognize in politicians today.
They don't feel an allegiance to the system? Because I've heard it said that some saying that they don't feel like in the old days, well, you're either left-wing or right-wing. They don't identify with that anymore.
Yes, I think they identify with ecological debates. They are concerned with the climate. But we have to talk to them for their everyday problems. And Frédéric Gilly is right. We have to talk to them like that. But I think there's another problem that people think that it's helplessness of the politicians.
Again, I stress this point. I'll put it to you, Gérald Olivier. Is it that they don't understand what these elections are about, or is it that they understand all too well that this isn't the election that matters?
It's a little bit of both. It's true that it's a lot easier to vote for a presidential election when you have one person to pick among 5 or 6. However, talking about the regional elections, the French have never really understood the point of that particular vote, and it has always been met with very low participation rate ever since
Gerard,
1972.
Since I was a kid, everybody's been talking about decentralization. It's one of these buzzwords that it's too top-down. Paris is too important. The regions have to have more power. So here's the opportunity, and people don't go to vote?
Well, I was a teenager in the 1970s too when they came up with that division of France, and I've only witnessed that people don't go to vote for that election. Plus, if you remember what happened back in 2000, I think it was 15, we had a reform with a new map of the region going down from 22 to what we have today, which is 13 or 14. I even forget. And a lot of people were very disappointed with that new map because they didn't feel like it reflected their actual regional roots. And you have one more reason for the very low participation rate today.
Frédéric Gilly, is that true? That the maps don't make sense?
Well,
we could call up if we want that map.
The question can be the map. The question can also be, what are you talking about? Elections are viewed as explanation exercises instead of being debate exercises. You talk about left-right divide. I mean, look at what the people on the power have done in the past decades. People say, we try left-wing, we tried right-wing, we tried left-wing again, we tried the center, and it's always the same. So is the problem of the left-right divide that does not exist anymore, or is it that left or right parties, they do the same thing?
All right, but here's where it gets confusing for us, and hopefully we'll clear it up now, and that is that the parties that did well with all that high abstention rate are the traditional ones. Bragging rights to best result in the second round goes to Carole Delga in the southwestern Occitania region. She's a socialist. She got 57.8% of the vote in the second round. Are you uncorking the champagne, Olivia, saying that's it, the socialists are back, you're going to win the next presidential election, and happy days are here again?
I'm not going to drink the champagne because the rate of the abstention is too high to get satisfied. It means that the socialists and the left still there in the heart of voters, but they're not enough voters.
And also, this is confusing. They're there in the southwest. Here in the Paris area, they did very badly. Even after they got together for the second round, they didn't gain many votes.
That's true. So
where are the voters from the left? Where are they?
They were there not a few months ago. So we have to talk to them. We have to show them that. I'm sure it's quite a special election. The COVID brought many things. People don't want to talk about politics now. Maybe it will change in a few months. We'll see. But I'm sure that we have to show that politicians are able to change things.
Jacques Maire, do you agree that there is a COVID effect, that people right now who have just come out of confinement in France aren't thinking about politics? Is that really the reason?
Yes, I think COVID probably plays a small part of this in this rate of participation. But I think that what is more important for me is a kind of depoliticization of the ballot. When you look at the votes, when people have to vote in the same time for the same candidate in departments and in regions, the level of the score might be very, very different. I just give you an example For example, for Gérald Darmanin, last week, Minister of Interior in the north of France, he was below 10% on the list of the majority of the presidential majority in the regional elections, and he was above 60% in his departmental election when he ran under his own name. And that happened many times. People disconnect votes from labels. People more or less integrate the fact that who should I want to favorize in this and that position? And that makes things very, very confusing. Of course, I do not think that the divide between right and left is, I would say, is the past. We can see it clearly, but the vote is, for me, much more a vote for the incumbent than a vote with, I would say, a very strong political message. That's my feeling.
Gérald Olivier, when Emmanuel Macron, who had never run for anything, any public office, becomes president in 2017, he campaigned on the notion that he was going to break the system, that it was going to be taking the best of the left and the best of the right. Has he broken the system when you look at the results from Sunday?
No, not at all. And his party obviously is one of the major losers of this electoral cycle, because they failed to gain any seat, not any seat, but any presidency of any region, and most of the time they finished fourth. But I would like to go back over what Jacques Maire just said in connection to one of the persons who was interviewed in your report. I believe someone mentioned the fact that they only vote for mayoral election or presidential election. People vote when they feel there is a direct connection. And it's true that in this regional level, they don't feel that connection. They might still feel it with the department, which explains the score of Gérald Darmanin, as was exposed a little bit earlier. But to go back to your earlier question, no, Emmanuel Macron failed to break the system. And actually what this reminds us is the actual circumstances of his election. Maybe we should look back and remember that Emmanuel Macron got through because François Fillon was, shall I say, eliminated even before the vote through media pressure and a media campaign which brought Marine Le Pen to the second round, and Marine Le Pen has no chance. She didn't in 2017.
I mean, he was involved in a parliamentary payroll. Hang on, he was involved in a. Fillon was involved in a parliamentary payroll scandal. That's hardly media pressure. It was he was the victim of his own downfall.
You don't. I do apologize about that. That's being very naive, and you know it because you're an experienced journalist. Other people did exactly what François Fillon had done. Others did worse. There are still people running France today who have done just as bad as he did, right, and no one's going after them.
We're not going to look.
I don't believe that for a minute.
We're not going to look back. We're going to look ahead when we come back.
But that's not the topic of today.
No, it's not the topic of today. We have to take a quick break. Right. We'll be right back. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're segging from regional elections here in France that saw a record abstention rate to, well, you could say this is day one of the pre-campaign for the presidential poll in 11 months' time. With us is Jacques Maire, member of the French Parliament, from Emmanuel Macron's La République En Marche party, socialist Paris City Councillor. Olivier Polski is with us as well. Frédéric Gilly, professor of urban studies at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po, and Gérald Olivier, editor of the France Amérique blog and columnist at Atlantico.fr. We were talking just before the break about the setbacks for Emmanuel Macron's party. There's also setbacks for the other person who all the polls say is tipped to make the second round of next year's presidential poll, the National Front, or now as they call the National Rally Party. It took all the might back in 2015, the last time you had a regional election, to thwart the far right from taking the Rust Belt northern region. At the time, it was Xavier Bertrand of the Les Républicains, the mainstream conservative, who gave a speech saying he was humbled how tough a battle it had been. This time, it turned out to be a breeze. As you can see from these numbers, there you have the National Rally candidate, just garnering a quarter of the vote, and an alliance of left-wing parties managing even less. Lo and behold, President Macron and Xavier Bertrand, both running for president, it seems, or nominally so, crossing paths this Monday at the inauguration in the northern town of Douai of a car battery factory for Renault.
Félicitations pour hier et heureux de se retrouver ici. C'est important qu'on ait réussi à faire reculer autant le FN. Je pense que c'est important, ça montre que quand on investit, on y arrive. Et l'abstention, l'abstention par contre. Elle dit beaucoup de choses.
It says a lot. He's talking there, Jacques Maire, as though this is a victory, Emmanuel Macron. And I gotta ask you, because it was a bit strange for many to see Macron going on what was a sort of a pre-campaign tour the last couple of weeks, while his candidates were trying to win votes in this regional elections.
I mean, you can't ask the president to be closed in the Élysée Palace for 2 months before any local election.
Well, how about campaigning for the candidates who are running in those regional polls?
I didn't see him with any, I would say, head of list of En Marche in any region in the last weeks. But what I saw him very active, trying to, I would say, to impulse the recovery plan for the economy, and also to try to persuade people on the fight against pandemic. That's why basically what are these two messages. But it's true that when we see that at the very same moment that there are the results of the election, somebody like Xavier Bertrand launched his own presidential campaign on the very same day of his election as the president of the region, probably everything has to be interpreted now. And when you see these discussions, it's not about the batteries, the plants of the region, it's about two potential candidates to the presidential election. And this is the way the media works. I mean, there is no way to avoid that.
No way to avoid it. Olivier Polsky, your thoughts on this, because the conversation during the campaign, as was mentioned in part one of our discussion by Frédéric, was a lot about issues that didn't have much to do with the regional elections. Emmanuel Macron is going to try to steer the campaign now towards him as the reformer. But what we've seen is a climate right now in France where the talk is more about identity politics, especially on the 24-hour news channels.
Well, what I can see is that Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen both failed. They failed to mobilize. They failed, they said both, vote for supporting me. I received personally a message from Laurent Saint-Martin to say, if you support Emmanuel Macron, then vote for me. So they failed, both. So I think that for next year, everything is opened. Everything can happen. And, well, we'll see.
Anything can happen in the presidential poll?
I just want to come back to the figure you just showed. 52.4% for Xavier Bertrand. And today was day one for Xavier Bertrand presidential campaign. But you're kind of erasing the effect of the abstention level. Because if you do the figure, if you do the math, Xavier Bertrand lost 700,000 votes.
Compared to 2015.
Then if you take the 700,000 votes he recalled this time to the 6 million electoral body, Xavier Bertrand has gathered around him 11.5% of the electoral population. 11.5% at the second rate.
So it's a hollow victory?
It's not even a victory. I mean, he has the right to govern, but he has no majority. He has the legitimate. He is legitimate by the vote, but he has no power at all. It was the same time last year. There was this all these talks about the wave, ecological wave, etc. In the past municipal election. If you look at the figures at the first round, last year, all the mayors elected by all the metropolitan area, from Montpellier to Paris, Nice, Nantes, etc., no one had more than 12% of the electoral body at the first rate. It ranged from 6 to 12. From 6 to 12, what can you change if you consider that with...
So is there a legitimacy problem with our elected officials?
Of course there is a legitimacy
when you're elected
problem.
by that few people?
There is a legitimacy problem, but it's not them. I mean, they have been elected. And they have arrived first. So they are on stage and they have the power. But the question is, what kind of power they have?
All right.
They have the power to gather everyone and to say, well, we have a democratic problem. We have to take it together.
All right. Then what about what happened with the far right? Because in the past, the calculus in elections in France was always that if turnout was low, the far right would do better. Well, their biggest hope was in the southeastern Provence-Alpes-Côte-d'Azur region. And there, too, it wasn't even close. The Conservatives soundly beating a former supporter of Nicolas Sarkozy, Thierry Mariani, who had jumped to the far right. Mariani, who, by the way, has got issues when he returns to his day job as member of the European Parliament. He's one of several MEPs put on a blacklist for using EU funds to sing the praises of Russia in elections in Crimea and Kazakhstan. Gérald Olivier, a low turnout, that should be great for the far right. What happened?
Well, I guess their own electors also failed to materialize at the polls. And I think that beyond just looking at the general number, the participation rate, we will have to wait until we know who it is that actually went to vote. And there was in Atlantico today an interview mentioning that it's probably a slightly older electorate, more traditional electorate, the one used to the old parties, the Parti Socialiste, or to Les Républicains, which explains partially at least why those two parties did slightly better than they had in the past. So the Rassemblement National, the National Rally's own electors failed. And I think some of them failed in the Provence-Côte-d'Azur region because they figured out the result ahead of time. Once you had the candidate for the environmental party who decided not to sit for the second round and asked his electors to vote for the center-right candidate, Mr. Muselier, people knew that there was no chance Mr. Mariani was going to come through.
Why did they come out to vote?
Voters decided not to show up at the poll.
Why did they come out to vote in 2015, both in the north and in the southeast, and this time they didn't for the second round? Those elections were very close in the runoff at the time.
Yes, true. Are you asking the question to me?
Yes.
Yeah. I believe that 2017 was a little bit of a wake-up call for some people on the National Rally side who figured the limits of their own party, meaning that it is a party that without any exterior alliance is never going to make it to a position of control. The Rassemblement National can never get to 50.1% by itself. And as long as it is ostracized by the rest of the political landscape, it will be marginalized. And I believe that in those elections, a lot of their own electors were disillusioned. You mentioned that term in your opening statement, and I believe that was partly true as to what happened yesterday.
Frédéric Gilly, have they hit a ceiling, the far right?
Well, I'm not a specialist of far-right voters, but I quite agree with what has just been said. I mean, I think a figure was taken out of a study saying 30% of the voters for the National Rally did it out of ideas persuasion. And the rest was for expression of the dislike for the establishment. And the run of the National Rally toward establishment has kind of disconnected maybe these people from the national rally.
So here in France, and it's difficult to explain for viewers abroad sometimes, Olivia, you have two things. On the one hand, a defiance of the established order. We saw it with the Yellow Vest movement, and a disillusion with all of the political class. Emmanuel Macron has followers, but a lot of people who dislike him strongly because of they associate him with the elites. And on the other hand, there's a certain conservative mindset. People don't want too much disruption, it seems.
Well, we'll see. What they want is justice, is employment, and they want many things. They want education for everyone, for their children. They want to have a path, and so I think if you talk to people to what they want, that's what Frédéric Joly said. I think you can bring them with you.
You see. In the in the presidential election 2007, the French voted for Nicolas Sarkozy. He said, with me, you're going to have the breakthrough, the rupture. Then...
Reform.
They voted, not reform, break.
A break with the past.
Yeah. Then in 2012, they voted for François Hollande, change. Then they voted for Emmanuel Macron, revolution. So you cannot say that people, French people, are for a conservative. They want change. They desperately want change. Yeah. They don't want change like change is done today. They want change to be done differently. They want change to be done with them. 2 years ago, there was the Yellow Jacket movement. No party at all has taken any lesson from what people said. No party at all. 2 months
But after, you had this grand débat, you know, these big public forums and these town hall meetings that took place around the country, and they listened to what they said.
All the words that have been spoken at that time are now in the archives, and they are taking dust. 2 months after the debate, there was this public debate for the European election. No candidate mentioned at all any word of what the people said. And if you want to think about what the people can, why and how they can come back, look at what happened in the United States. In the midterm and in the presidential race, you had a rise in the participation rate. Why? Just because politicians did politics again. They did again meeting, discussions. If you look at what the Democratic parties, the Democrats, did in all over the country, they listen in the primary run.
You think the French political class is not listening enough, even today?
Even today.
Jacques Maire, your thoughts?
Yes, I would pretty share this view. I think that there is a promise of political renovation, which was put forward by the president and his team in 2017. There have been some attempts, I would say, to transform the country, being on the economic and social sphere. But probably what we lack is commitment and involvement of people. I think there was a very good, I would say, reconnection during the grand debate, and which implied not only the president but also the mayors and many citizens. One of the consequences was the Citizens' Conference on Climate, which was also something as a test. I think we have to go further. I think we have to, I would say, to respect and to engage in our transformation agenda, I would say, the local territories.
But Jacques Maire, here's the problem. Right now, and we saw it in the build-up to these local and regional elections, the identity issues were all over the 24-hour news channels. The talk about Islamo-leftism, the talk about, you know, these kinds of identity issues. Is that going to be the conversation, or the reforms that you're talking about for the next 11 months?
And that is true that there is a kind of trap. about what could be at the core of the debate, of the public debate in the coming months. Of course, everybody thinks that security, law, order is a must, but it's not a project. We have to ensure security. We have to, I would say, not to leave these themes to the extreme right or to the conservatives. And I think some ground has been made by us, by new police forces. I would say a judiciary which is more involved and engaged. That is true. But my belief is that the expectations of French people in the coming months is really the recovery for on the health side and the social side. And it's true that if we do not have a project, if we do not propose to the public, to the opinion, I would say not a dream, but a perspective, a vision, as it was the case in 2017, I think we'll be defensive, and the debate will probably be centered around the fears. Okay, fears about, and there are different kinds of fears. You have fears coming from the extreme right, fear coming from the ecologists, and if people react only by fear, I think it's not the most positive political motivation. So the big debate and the big challenge for us is: are we able to debate and to propose, I would say, a vision and a project for 2022? And that is what I expect from my majority.
Coming out of COVID, Gérald Olivier, do citizens want another disruptor, as described a short while ago by Frédéric Gilly, or do they want someone who's going to reassure?
They don't necessarily want a disruptor, but they want what the French called un homme présidentiel, and I forget how to translate that. That would be a providential man.
Someone who looks the part.
They want a man to solve their problems. You know, the new guy on the block, and that's pretty much what Macron looked like in 2017, and he turned out to be a very common politician. The French system is a lot more closed than the American system. And Frédéric Gilly, I believe, mentioned the enthusiasm of the American electorate back in 2016, 2020. And yes, it's true, but Donald Trump is a very charismatic man, whether you like him or whether you don't. And he brings people to the poll. The French system is not as open as the American system. You have to rise through the ranks so that when people make it to the presidential echelon, to the presidential step, people already know them, and some of them are already blasé. And I believe that's what will happen with Pécresse or Wauquiez or Monsieur Bertrand, the three candidates from the center-right that might try to fight it off in the coming year. They're people who have been here. They've been around, and I believe that most voters would welcome someone new. Not necessarily
Is it too late now, or can there be someone new? Who would be the new person?
I believe it's too late. I believe someone can come in and do something on the first round of the ballot, but not win the overall race. I mean, I hate to be cynical, but yesterday's and last week's election, the result may not have been good for the presidential party, for La République En Marche. I think we're quite reassuring for Mr. Macron himself.
1 year before the presidential race,
of 2022.
The presidential race in 2012, it was Dominique Strauss-Kahn who was supposed to be the president. 1 year before 2017, it was either Nicolas Sarkozy or François Fillon or Alain Juppé that was supposed to be the guy. Both, they were beaten by François Hollande and Emmanuel Macron, who rise up in 6 months just before the election. I mean, everything is open for the next year.
And if Macron should win re-election, he'd be the first incumbent to win with a sitting majority under the Fifth Republic. So quite a tall order still. I want to thank you, Frédéric Gilly. I want to thank as well Olivia Polsky, Jacques Maire, and Gérald Olivier for joining us. Thank you. More coverage on French politics on our website, france24.com.